Hi everyone, it's Justine. You know how clothes are made, right? But do you really know the entire process? For instance, this here is a blue knitted turtleneck sweater. What you can't see is that it's made in Peru in alpaca. And alpaca like this absolute sweetness right here. This is the fluffiest thing I've ever touched. Angora cats do not even come close. Problem. This little alpaca has short white hairs, while my blue sweater is made out of one single long thread. So how do we go from the alpaca to the finished garment? Earlier this year, I had the chance of traveling to Peru, where I could learn more about how garments are made, both by hand and by machine. There are not many countries in the world that still make fabric by hand. Peru is one of these countries, and they have incredible know-how transmitted across centuries. In this video, I'd like to show you how much more work goes into a garment than what you might think. The story of my sweater starts with an alpaca. Alpacas produce between 3 and 3.5 kilos of hairs per year. They get a haircut once a year, and it takes a year to grow back. There are other animals whose hairs are also used to make fabric. Alpacas have three cousins, Llama, guanaco, and vicuña. Llamas have rather coarse and stiff hairs. Alpacas are softer. Vicuñas have the softest hairs, aka the most expensive hairs. All four live in South America. Llamas are mostly in Bolivia. Alpacas mostly in Peru. These two are domesticated. And then guanaco and vicuñas are wild and endangered. If you see them, enjoy the moment, but then leave them alone. In case you wonder about other types of wool, cashmere and mohair come from goats. Camel hair and yak hair are also used, but less often. Regular wool, mostly used, comes from regular sheep. In Peru, the hairs are still mostly collected by hand. It's a very manual process, and that's important. Technically, no animal has to suffer for wool to be collected, and there are certifications and labels to prove you the origin and to prove that the animals were treated ethically during the process. If you're interested in this topic, which matters a lot to me, I will put further information in the description for you. Back to my alpacas peruanos. They come in multiple different colors. Again, look at that fluff. There are 32 natural colors, ranging from beige and light gray to dark brown and dark gray. The first task after collecting the hairs is to group it kind of by color. Then the hairs that are too damaged or that are tangled with twigs or anything get sorted out manually. You end up with these piles of hairs of one color. At this point, it's really just handfuls. You can't make fabric with that. Cotton is the same. When you collect cotton from a cotton flower, like this, what you get is bits and pieces. It needs more work before it's an actual thread. The only natural fiber that comes out directly as a filament is silk. And do you know what baby alpaca means? That's something I actually got wrong this entire time. I learned something new. Listen, when it says 100% baby alpaca, it doesn't mean the first haircut of a young alpaca. Who would have guessed? It actually means the hairs from the area under the belly, because there the hair is softer than the back or the neck that gets rain and dust and dirt all year. When they're talking about the first haircut a young alpaca ever gets, it's actually called super baby, and it's even softer and more expensive than what you would think. Now let's turn these hairs into thread. The first machine sorts out the greasy fibers and the dust that are left after the manual process. Then the hairs are washed and moved around in that large bath. The next one is a carding machine. It detangles, cleans even more, and starts intertwining the fibers in preparation for the spinning process. Cotton is exactly the same process. These fibers go through toothed wheels that twist them together even more. See how it now comes out in longer strands. Then the hairs are combed in a giant combing machine. That one is a circular one. The next one prepares balls of a fixed weight of 12 kilos. The big balls are turned into finer bobbins. We're getting closer. And from the bobbins, the hairs are spun together. That is now officially a thread. It is spun fiber. The hairs have been twisted so many times in the process that now they constitute one long and clean thread that you can actually make fabric with. Once you have the thread, you can either knit it or weave it. This is a flatbed knitting machine. The pattern piece coming out at the bottom that you see is flat. You would do the same for all the pieces of the garment and then sew the pieces together. But there are also circular knitting machines where the output is already a 3D garment. And this is a weaving loom, again an old one. The woven fabric comes out here in large rolls, wrapped around these wooden cylinders. Nowadays, both knitting and weaving machines can be programmed, automated to produce any pattern you want. It's super streamlined, there are no mistakes anymore. See, this blue sweater is technically perfect. It even has a different color detail around the armholes. It's a very complex knit actually. It is completely machine knitted. This blanket is also made of alpaca, but woven by a machine. That's why the pattern is absolutely regular. Contrary to the knitting process that only needs one thread going back and forth making loops, the weaving process needs two threads. You have the warp threads vertical on the loom going like this, and then the weft threads go across. So above, under, above, under. The next row goes under, above, and so on. It has to be very tight in order to not loosen up over time. Because it needs to be done super tightly, hand weaving takes a long time. Example, this is a belt that I bought from a grandma in Peru's Sacred Valley. Here the warp, you should look at it like this actually. The warp is the length and the weft threads are going across like this. This is the front side, this is the back side. And when you weave with patterns, the back side will be different most of the time. To get enough tension during the weaving process, they will tie one end of the belt to a tree, a pillar, whatever, and they will tie the other end to their waists. Then they will sit on the floor, like make it tight, pull, go, and as the belt grows and they have more length, they will sit back and sit back and sit back, and at the end you have a belt. You know it's handmade when there are little mistakes. If you look at the repeats of the pattern, you will see, for instance, here or here, little irregularities. If you go to a handcraft market somewhere in the world, look at the mistakes, look at the fabric close up, and that will tell you whether it's really handmade. Don't trust the seller, check. This is one long, thin surface, a belt. But if you want to make larger surfaces in weaving, you will have to use not 2 pillars to get tension, but 4. A manual loom looks like this. You have a pillar in every corner. They use pieces of wood to keep the work flat as they go, you see, and to prevent the threads from tangling because the patterns are quite complex. On these looms, you see that the warp threads determine the dominant stripe colors. What about colors? We haven't talked about colors yet. For over 1,000 years, Andean people have been masters not only in textile making and pattern design, but also in coloring. They learned to make incredible natural dyes from stones, woods, plants. Here are examples of materials and the colors that they produce. Would you have guessed that such intense colors would come out of ingredients that all seem to range between beige and brown? This is a series of colored threads dyed naturally. No matter which ingredient you start with, it has to be grinded into powder, pigment. Then that powder is cooked together with the fibers in a pot for 2 hours and boom, you get a colorful thread. I want to show you the most beautiful and colorful handmade fabrics I've ever seen. In Lima, I went to the Amano Museum. Their textile collection is fabulous. This is a little divinity, over 500 years old. Now you know that the handwork isn't just the embroidery itself, but also the woven fabric underneath it, belt pieces. Look at the intensity of that naturally dyed pink and how tight the weave is. Handwork. In these samples, the level of handcraft is so high, it is hard to actually find irregularities. Isn't it super satisfying to look at fabrics knowing the amount of work behind each piece? I guess the thing that impressed me the most in that process was to see how the Peruvian culture, beliefs and history got woven or knitted into the fabric. All patterns tell a story in Peru. And I found that super impressive because it was kind of their main means of expression, while Europeans at the same time were rather using painting. So I made it my goal to use the time that I so happen to have on my hands right now to improve my fine art skills. You might know Skillshare already. It's an online community where you can learn skills from iPhone photography to creative writing or how to start a YouTube channel. That one is taught by Sorella Moore, who does a great job here on YouTube and also happens to be a talented photographer. Basically, Skillshare has classes about anything you always wanted to get into. The way it works is subscription-based. It costs under $10 a month for limited access. And for the first 500 of my subscribers who register, Skillshare is offering a 2-month free trial. To get it, you need to register through the special link that I put in the description down below. And in case you wonder which courses I picked, creating patterns in Adobe Illustrator, and also hand lettering for beginners and ink drawing. These are manual and or therapeutic things that you can do indoor. If you learned something that you didn't know in this video, thumbs up, thank you very much. This trip to Peru was highly inspiring. I'm thankful that I was allowed to film there, to be able to make this video. I sincerely hope that you enjoyed it. I feel like this year is a pattern year. The runways have been showing more patterns, more prints, and more colors than in previous seasons. If you haven't watched my video on spring-summer fashion trends yet, I will link it here in the corner on the card, as well as down below for you. If you are subscribed to this channel, I will see you on Wednesday for a new video. Until then, take care.